Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ynse de Boer. I'm partner and managing director for Accenture strategy and sustainability practice here in Asia Pacific. And let me briefly introduce our wonderful panelists for this afternoon. First of all, we have Leonie Schreve, fellow Dutch woman from the Netherlands. Leonie is the global head of sustainable finance at the Internationale Nederlanden Group, ING Bank. We have Coombs, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer for Asia Pacific at Interface. We have Thampuran as the Managing Director of ASTAR. And last but not least, Hamid, who's the Director of Global Manufacturing at Royce. And for the next hour, hopefully with as much interaction amongst the panel as well as with you, people in the audience, we'll talk about moving towards a circular and restorative economy. And I'll briefly tee that up and then hand over to the esteemed panelist. First thing I would say to tee up this subject is really with the statement that the global economic growth model is in trouble. Economic development correlated with resource use, and from now till 2030 is about 2.5 billion additional people that will be moving up the economic development curve. And in addition to the environmental crunch that is already getting to, that's already visible in economic terms as well. If you look at until 2000, the year 2000, at the amount of what happens with the commodity price index for every 1% growth of GDP, the global economy, the commodity price index grew by only about 0.5%. From 2000 onwards, for every additional 1% of economic growth, the commodity price index grew by 1.9%. So what that means on a macroeconomic perspective is that the global economy is becoming less and less profitable because of this resource crunch, so to speak. Now, the question is, can businesses turn the tide, and can businesses be successful in decoupling the use of constrained resources and economic growth? And I think my statement would be that businesses should be interested because the economic opportunity is huge. It's from now to 2050, adds up to about $4.5 trillion in total, globally. Breaks down in a couple of components. There's things like wasted resources, adding up to about $1.7 trillion. There's wasted embedded value, adding up to about $1.3 trillion. There's things like wasted capacity that's already out there in the economy, worth about $600 billion. And there's wasted life cycles, adding up to roughly $900 billion. So the question is then, if businesses should be interested, what are some of those business models that businesses can actually deploy and employ to capture this opportunity? And I really look forward to discuss it in more detail with the panelists. Brief summing up of 5 of them. Recovery and recycling. Many of you will be known with it and familiar with it. It's basically everything that used to be considered waste is being revived for other uses. Things like circular supply chain, where we use renewable, recyclable, or biodegradable materials that can be used as inputs in consecutive life cycles. Things like sharing platforms, where increasingly enabled by new forms of digital technologies, new relationships and new business opportunities are being forced for consumers, for companies, micro-entrepreneurs who then rent, share, swap, lend their idle goods, so to better make use of the existing capacity that's out there available already in the economy. Product life extension, by maintaining and improving products through repairs, upgrades, remanufacturing, remarketing, companies can keep them economically useful for as long as possible. And then last but not least, product as a service. And I'm really looking forward to diving into some of the examples around that. But that's really around sort of this point that what if manufacturers would take ownership of the total cost of ownership rather than leaving that with the consumer? Many would immediately adjust their focus to things like longevity, reliability, and reusability. So when consumers lease or pay for products, the business model really fundamentally changes, and it shifts in a good way. Performance trumps volume, durability tops disposability, and companies have an opportunity to build new relationships with customers. So that's, in short, how I wanted to tee up this subject matter. So the opportunity is huge. There's a range of different business models available out there for companies to go and tap that opportunity. So I'd like to turn to you, Leonie, first. ING Bank, you lead the sustainable finance business within the ING Bank. Can you tell us a little bit, first obviously, about yourself, what you do, but also about what ING Bank does in this particular area?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, indeed, before diving into also the circular economy challenges, I think it's good to just describe a little bit the journey that ING embarked upon. I joined ING about, well, a bit over 12 years ago, before that working as consultant, usually in the space of business and sustainability, so not a typical banker background. Although I moved really to the commercial side of ING Bank in 2012 to lead the effort in setting up the sustainable finance approach. And that is a commercial approach, a front office approach to drive the portfolio of ING, so really the global portfolio in all sectors towards more sustainability. And why did we embark on that journey? That is really because of the fact that we recognize that sustainable business is better business. And we've seen in our own portfolio that companies that proactively address resource scarcity already have better credit ratings. Also, we see from more public research that the financial performance is also better. So for us, it was really a decision. It does make business sense to focus on companies that take resource scarcity seriously, but also the recognition that if we want to be a profitable company in a number of years' time, we should also ensure that our portfolio is anticipating on that. And we all know that there's a world in front of us with a lot of pressure on resources and sustainability in the challenges of sustainability in general. So it does make sense to look at that, to see what are the solutions and how can we ensure that we focus on the leaders of tomorrow's economy. So today we have 21 billion in what we call sustainable outperformers. That is both the existing business like renewable energy, but also newer types of business. And earlier this year we issued a report on circular economy, and with the title Rethinking Finance in the Circular Economy, which is focused at do we need to reform, how do we need to think along with clients when they are changing their business models the way you've described in the different five business models. How can you then reach out to finance? Finance also needs to take the challenges that there are in transforming towards circular business models into account. So that report describes the challenges. We've also embarked on a journey with clients to address at an early stage, how can we support you in a transition towards a circular economy, towards a sustainable economy. And that is, for us, it's also not that we've got a number of products on the shelf that we can offer. It's very much also for us still a search in how can we make sure that all the expertise that we have in-house, that we can apply that in a good way. Because often it is just a combination of existing knowledge that we have, a combination of different products that we have in-house to ensure that we can adopt and change towards circular economy financing models. Leasing type of transactions. But if you think of, and that's one of the challenges, if you allow me to go into that still, that if you move towards providing a service, and that means that also cash doesn't come in anymore at the moment you engage in the service once you sell the product. So that means that your balance sheet is really changing, which then again means for us as a bank to look at our models. How can we ensure that we can service those kind of business models well, maybe we need to adapt our financial models as well. So cash flow optimization, but also considering, can we finance on the basis of contracts only, contracts as collateral? How does that work in a legal structure? Those are all kind of challenges that we need to figure out together with clients in working towards this circular economy.
I think that's fascinating. Thanks, Leonie. So business transformation requires financing. Yeah, that's the business opportunity for ING, and you're in the midst of the journey to figure out what it also means in terms of how you service those clients. Maybe let's turn to a business that, I don't know whether you actually are a client of the ING. If you're not, maybe you want to consider. I'm doing some...
I think not.
Yeah, you are.
Open to offers.
But Rob, I mean, we had a brief chat just now, and clearly Interface has been practicing this concept of circular economy way before the term became even fashionable. Would you like to share a thing or two about sort of what it is that you've been doing yourself in this area, as well as the journey of the company? Because I think it's a very interesting one.
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon. If you think about the sort of issues that we've been discussing over the last couple of hours, most of them go back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, to the point at which we decided 250 years ago to adopt a business model that was focused on trying to optimize the productivity of labor by throwing natural resources at it. And we've been, I guess, using that model now for the last 250 years, even as the labor versus resource availability is completely reversed. We have a business that in fact goes back, or rather an industry that goes back to the dawn of that whole process. We are in textiles, and we make carpet tiles that we service into commercial offices, hotels like this one, schools, hospitals, and so on. So we're in a fairly old-fashioned industry, one that's highly material and energy intensive as well. And we're about 45 years old. We are a listed company in the US. And luckily for us, about halfway through our life, about 22 or 23 years ago, our founder had an awakening that the level to which we were damaging a natural environment ultimately would start to work against ourselves and other businesses like ours. And he had, at the age of 62, what he called his midlife correction, and set us out on a completely different path, a path to completely change the model. And we kicked off with a series of 7 strategies, one of which was trying to create a closed-loop model for the products that we offer. And it's 23 years later, we set out with a goal to get to the year 2020 in such a way that we had 0 negative environmental impact. We think we're about 65% of the way there. And the whole closed loop process has been one of the really challenging parts of the journey, because it's tough. It is really difficult. There's a whole series of technical challenges. There's a whole series of logistical challenges. And fundamentally, you've got to almost completely reverse the way that you think about your product, about your supply chain, about how you engineer. We've had engineers in the business that have spent their lifetime trying to make sure that the various elements of the carpet can never ever be separated, can never ever delaminate, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and say, can you now completely change that and make sure that you can actually separate each individual element for recycling, but only when I say so. And it's a completely different way of looking at the business, which, by the way, has been hugely engaging for some of the older engineers that have found a new lease of life working with these new ideas. We're at a point where our customers have become our suppliers have become our customers. We are trying to work out this very complex logistical model whereby you move from having a few very large-scale suppliers to having thousands of smaller scale suppliers. How do you keep touch with them? How do you ensure that you can take your product back at the right time? How do you do it efficiently? And again, we're about 65% of the way through, with some really interesting learnings along the way. So we're not quite there yet, but we have made some progress.
Fascinating. Thanks, Rob. I'd love to dive into a little bit more detail in just a few minutes and maybe exchange a bit, because I know that Hamid has some learnings there as well. I think really keen to exchange notes there, and maybe Leonie learn a thing or two for the two of us as well. So Raj, maybe let me turn to you, because you're a managing director of ASTAR, which is, for those of you who are not familiar, it's a particularly impressive research organization here in Singapore, employing more than 5,500 researchers here in Singapore, across, and I did note down, 61 nationalities. So there you go. And this is actually an area that ASTAR is putting a lot of emphasis on as well. Raj, can you tell us a little bit more?
Right, thank you. Yes, so maybe a little bit about ASTAR. ASTAR is a government agency that's been chartered to support and invest R&D with an economic axis. We are managed by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And as was said, we have 5,430 researchers and corporate administrators. Half of those have PhDs, the other half come from 61 different nationalities. And I was hoping today to have share with you my thinking about business transformation through technology, and not so much just technologies that make advances progressive in a way in which they contribute to sustainable development, but the role of public sector R&D organizations in the national innovation system to partner the private sector in developing capabilities, driving technologies, developing new solutions for sustainable development. I think would be an interesting topic, particularly using the model of open innovations. And I think just previous to this panel, there's a panelist who talked about corporate influence. And then, of course, Singapore's obstacles to the use of renewable energy. So the areas that ASTAR is interested in is really to foster, catalyze public-private partnerships, and the influence of the corporate in trying to shape the way we develop our support our R&D agenda is fundamental. And I think in many national innovation systems, that is something that the corporate organizations can do a lot more in terms of trying to influence their R&D agenda, particularly when there are organizations that are geared to partner private sector in innovations. The other is our efforts in renewable energy. I think solar has been our major focus, certainly in R&D and in partnering private sector. I think we also saw that manufacturing, being a major constituent of our economy, was an area in which we had to find ways to invest in innovations and research and development efforts that can contribute to better manufacturing practices. And remanufacturing is an area that we've made a major investment in. I mean, it's different from recycling or refurbishment or repair. It's restoration, as you would restore Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. It is taking an end-of-life product and bringing it back to the original state, and preferably an improved state. Yeah. And so inherently in the design of engineering components or other types of components, if you can incorporate this whole notion of these components or these systems become remanufactured, and certainly it leads to savings. I understand there are reports that say 30% savings in cost, 60% savings in energy, 70% savings in materials, 60% savings in lead time. So this is an area that we have invested in, and we did this through public-private partnerships. There's a center called Advanced Remanufacturing Technology Center. Royce is one of our partners.
Exactly.
As is companies from Japan and Europe in many different other sectors. And how technologies can go into trying to remanufacture products across many different ecosystems. that's technology intensive. So that's really where I'd be interested to have a conversation.
Fascinating. Thanks, Raj. And probably a nice segue as well into Hamid, who is global director for manufacturing. I think one of the most reputable and admired brands in the manufacturing space in the world. So you are collaborating with ASTAR, Hamid. Not necessarily about that, but maybe first a little bit about sort of what is Rolls-Royce doing, and what are some of those opportunities and challenges that you've been dealing with in Rolls-Royce in this area.
Good afternoon to you. Rolls-Royce, as most of you probably would know, is easy information to get. We operate in aerospace and land and sea, two distinct divisions. We're well known for our aerospace businesses. You'll see them in the civil aircrafts and so on and so forth. But land and sea and marine businesses and power generation, I think perhaps we're not as well known, but we have a huge product portfolio. In total, we have about over 70 global sites where we make and service our customers' requirements. You look at circular economy, a lot has been written about this in the last quite a few years, and to me it's a social and economic necessity, but one can get daunted by the scale of what's been written and the way it's been articulated, which is fine, but at practical level, our approach is to take small steps and build up a portfolio of things that we can do to enable a circular economy in our one company, and therefore in the areas we operate, not just for ourselves, but also for our supply chain partners and our customers. And you can think about it a number of ways. I prefer to think about more efficient use of resources. That means from designing blueprint designs, which are design one, use many times, commodity templates, so that you can share those commodities on different platforms, technologies that can go across aerospace into land and sea as well, modeling methods, systems, aspects like these. But more importantly, in running day-to-day value chains, from cutting metal to consumables, to packaging, to transportation, to use of energy, and then the service we provide to our customers and the requirements, the way we communicate those requirements with our suppliers, and ensuring that the complete value chain, not just our domestic plants and our domestic operations, the complete value chain is as efficient as we can make it, which is all about highest value add and lowest waste in all its forms. And there are a variety of things that we do. I'll give you one example. We have technology agreements with 31 universities. We've got the UTCs, and we are working on a number of advanced technologies to make sure that we can make our future products a lot more efficient and environmentally friendly. We have at least 8 global centers. ARTC is one of them that we partner with to run a number of technology programs, a few hundred actually, all about improving quality and reducing waste. I'll give you one example. Some of the new factories we just built, the one in Washington in UK, close to Sunderland. The turbine disc, for example, from 46 processes to 24 processes. Suddenly you've reduced the number of setups, the number of energy usage points, the number of tooling, the number of iterations of how you're going to do it, the number of setups, the number of datums, the number of movements. And that's the way to think about the practical aspects which ultimately contributes to a circular economy. So this is today. Going forward, our understanding is that the future value chain will provide unique business opportunities. For example, today's production process, thus the perception, is tomorrow's manufacturing value chain, research and development, proving, demonstration, making, services, repair, remanufacturing, and providing intelligence through all this value chain to your customers and suppliers so they can operate more efficiently. So there could be, for example, I'll finish on this, an example of a provider, and could be us, could be our suppliers, could be our partners, who are using the cloud and the data processing ability for the future, can look into remotely into the thousands of machine tools running across our collective businesses and preempting any machine that goes out of condition, vertical axis, horizontal axis, remain within the tight limits. Guess what that does do? That reduces any opportunity of creating waste and rework, which ultimately introduces more waste, more energy, and reuse. So one can have a service provider, one of our customers, suppliers, or ourselves, looks across the entire value chain, a few 100,000 machine tools, and provides intelligent monitoring that can preempt any waste generation in this value chain. That's just one example. I can give you many more examples like that. So that's the thought process. Start and build up your portfolio and then take on the bigger challenges that cover the whole value chain.
Yeah, thanks, Hamid. I'd like to continue on that note a little bit further because I think it's just last week or the week prior to that, I was with set of professionals from the waste management industry, and there still is a fairly wide misconception that this is all about reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I think clearly from the examples and the stories that I just heard, you both from a manufacturing perspective and you both from a sort of research and a financing perspective went way beyond that. I think you just explained that it's really about starting small and making small steps and then scaling bigger. But what are some of the other experiences, and how have you been successful in taking this beyond the triple R, if you will? Rob,
I think one of the things we've found so far is that it's a much more inclusive way of doing business as well. So an example is that we make our carpets, or have over time made our carpets, using nylon fiber, which comes from oil. So how do we cut the link to oil? And one of the other products around the world of which there is a huge amount of waste made from nylon is discarded fishing nets. So you've got 650 million people around the world whose livelihoods depend on fishing. And you've got a huge ecological problem in the sense that you get a huge amount of used nets being dumped on beaches, clogging up waterways, ghost fishing, and so on. So we established a partnership with a group in the Philippines to attempt to solve three problems at once. One was to try to develop a new source of nylon material. The second one was to try and address the problem of this ecological damage to beaches and waterways in the Philippines. And the third one was to attempt to provide more income through a more inclusive business model to local villages. So we worked on the ground with some local groups, and we encouraged them to collect the nets from the beaches, and in turn provided income that has so far supplied about 250,000 meals back to local villages. And they are encouraged to bail up the nets. They send them back to our yarn supplier, which in turn works to produce nylon that we can then use in the carpet. So we've addressed an ecological issue, we've addressed an issue in terms of income generation for local villages, and we have found a new source of supply that cuts our link back to the oil well. So that probably is our most recent example of a circular process that is much more inclusive and offers much more shared value, not only to interface, but also to a much wider supply base.
So consumers become suppliers, suppliers become consumers, much more inclusive. And I guess that also applies to the research aspect then, Raj. And feel free to advertise about sort of all the goodness that ASTAR can do in terms of research for manufacturing organizations, amongst others. But can you maybe share a bit more about how that inclusiveness works well? And if you want to use the example of Rolls-Royce, feel free to, but another one is also fine. I mean, how does that work well? Because I can imagine you can't work as a standalone sort of silo to be really effective, right. I imagine.
Precisely. I think because knowledge doesn't reside with one focal organization, I think it really is important that you look at collaboration as being integral and intrinsic to make any kind of advances in technology and innovation, and then thinking about the creative ways in which you apply technologies and innovations. So it is vital in our view that if we're going to make any kind of impact on the economy, if you're going to develop industries, you have to forge partnerships. You have to be inclusive. And they, not necessarily public-private partnerships, they can be public-public-private partnerships, they can be private-private partnerships. And the whole issue is about how you can make an environment and atmosphere conducive enough to catalyze these interactions where all performers see it as being beneficial. To want to collaborate, to want to work together, want to look at solutions in different ways. So you mentioned the 3 R's. There's of course technologies where you even think about replacing. And the well-known one is in the chemicals industry, where you start to extract from the biomass sources, as opposed to the fossil fuel sources, ways in which you can create drop-in chemicals that go into commodity products, into rubber, into nylon, and we've worked with companies that are on Jurong Island, which in Singapore is our chemicals hub. Very important industry. It has, of course, carbon emission problems, as you know. But we have worked with some of these companies to look at ways in you can get drop-in chemicals from greener derivative point source, like cellulose. Mm-hmm. And then these drop-in chemicals, like I said, adipic acid, butadiene, acrylic acids that go into these common polymers and rubbers. So you can replace. And then technology really is advanced because you know the kinds of problems that the corporates are looking for solutions. You work with domain experts. You have scientists coming together saying this is an interesting problem to work on. And then essentially you get a win-win, really, something that's mutually beneficial. So that is fundamental, I think. Yeah. And certainly in sustainability and developments in this field, I think it's just vital that you be inclusive and not insular.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I was actually about to draw the parallel into finance, because I'm just wondering, Leonie, to what extent do you experience that inclusiveness from businesses? I mean, are businesses reaching out to ING Bank to really think about this and including you early on in the process? Yeah. See the same?
Yeah, especially since we've also since we released that report on circular economy, and also since we've launched a toolkit for all our relationship managers to support them in addressing the topic, because usually our account manager sits with the treasurer and the discussion is about financials and about the regular products that we offer. But there is much more, and especially in a changing economy, and when there are areas where our clients are transitioning towards, they encounter challenges, and it is good to discuss those at an early stage. So we've developed a tool that enables our relationship managers to have such a conversation at an early stage. And the interesting thing is that the first time is maybe a bit scary, but once they've done that, the experiences so far are actually quite good, because the discussion evolves much more into a strategic discussion on where is your client moving towards and how can you partner. So we've had one client who also said, I'm not just looking for a bank, I'm looking for a partner who can think along with me, where are we in 10 years' time? And those are the kind of partnerships that you need in sustainability challenges, but also circular economy challenges. So we've taken a share in equity stake in a company that I'm not allowed to call it a waste management company, but it's just easy maybe for you to understand what kind of company it is. They talk about resources and really see a valuable and significant growth model in resource management. They have a special separation model. They develop really high value resources from the resources they buy from all kind of corporates, and deliver those to textile industry, to food industry, to several specialized industries, and really make high value products out of it again. And those are models that we should all recognize and also support in growth. So that's why indeed we are partnering with them and have taken a stake in them to support the growth further. That's one of the examples.
Yeah, nice. So, maybe let's turn to maybe to Rob and Hamid as our two representatives of the manufacturing industry. I mean, what are your views? Is capital truly a constraint in really progressing this agenda in your business? And and indeed, could a bank be a partner in this? And I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but let's do some quick market research here. Hamid, what are your views?
I said a little bit earlier that, implied anyway, that the challenges of circular economy transcend individual company boundaries and occasionally country boundaries too. These are significant challenges. To give you an example, many of the elements that we take for granted that goes into alloys that make us fly wonderfully in a comfortable environment are slowly running out. That's just one example. So, and the environmental pressures, rightly so, for social and other reasons, pose a challenge to industry across all sectors, which is beyond this ability of any one company. I think the only solution is collaboration and partnerships, and global collaboration and partnership. I'll give you lots of examples just to make the point. We operate, one of our core values is to create innovation through partnerships, and that's the reason I mentioned 31 odd university technology centers, but then the manufacturing research centers, for example, the MTC, where we are also developing, in addition to the ARTC, we're developing the powder-based additive layer manufacturing. We're working with what? 50, 60 companies there. Why? Because think about today's manufacturing process. You take a big forging or a casting and machine the hell out of it to create the ultimate shape. Hundreds of hours of machining, possibly waste, chipping, all that resource that we can ill afford. Wouldn't it be nice for us to take powder and slowly grow it to its ultimate shape, making every use of the small particles that make up the total? However, can one company make this technology come good? No. Equipment providers, powder chain suppliers, quality assurance, verification of the product, how do you inspect it, how do you validate it, extends beyond the remit of one company. So you work in collaborative partnerships to create solutions that cross-sector and industrial solutions, because no transformation has ever come about without sheer hard work and effort. The transformation to circular economy is a major ask. So if that is the case, there has to be a real need for government-private partnership. Private between companies and government. And the reason is simple, because in the initial stage of development, which can be very, very expensive, a single company putting R&D funds in the hope that there will be a solution is very hard to justify. If the same solution can be shared across 10, 15, 20, 50 partners, then it becomes a national asset, and therefore government-private partnerships enables that to launch the research and development and progress it with intelligent interventions until the technology is proven, and then the business can implement it through their own demonstration models. Many of these things will require partnerships, not between companies alone, but with governments, and therefore, by necessity, with financial institutions. one of the problems of manufacturing in the recent years has been the capital impatience. You want returns in 6 months, but that's not going to happen for this kind of major transformation.
Yeah.
It's going to take years. We have to have a long-term view. We have to have funding model that understands the merits of doing this in the longer term, and we have to have visionary people who understand A, the necessity, and B, the business benefit at national and individual company levels over the longer term.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Rob, your views on this capital?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're a US listed company, and when we first started talking about this stuff 23, 24 years ago, the analysts that followed our stock thought we were mad and they dumped it. And it took us a long time to figure out how to properly engage with that world as we stepped along our journey. Ultimately, we have found a way forward with that, and there is such a strong business case for trying to develop a business that is much more sustainable, trying to model it, if you like, on the way that the natural world works, that I think we have now a much greater level of comfort as we discuss with investor groups and others as to our rationale and the outcome. And you know, what we've found by attempting to run a much more sustainable business is that you have far less waste in the business. You design much better products, and that's often because you are looking at lessons and innovations that come from the natural world to feed into your innovation process. So you end up with lower cost, you end up with much better products, you have many more customers. We work mainly B2B, and we've found increasingly over the years that most of our customers now want to be doing business with companies that care about the way that they make their money. And finally, we have a much greater level of skill, energy, and engagement amongst our people. It may surprise you to know that very few people leave university to go and work for a carpet company. And what we found is that if we can get in front of people coming out of university or anybody out there in the market for a job, if we can tell our story, show the history, show that we're serious about it, we almost never fail to get our person on board. So, you know, if you're standing in front of your maker or in front of your CFO and you're talking about lower cost through less waste, through improved product design, through many more customers, through a much stronger, more engaged team of people, why wouldn't you do this stuff? Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to turn to some of the questions in the audience. There's one, I think, for the technology lovers, from the technology lovers, one specifically for you, Raj, where there's a broad consensus amongst the audience that they want to understand or hear about some of those disruptive, and I will add myself the word cool technologies that some of the engineers at ASTAR are working on. Can you give us...
How much time do you have?
Not a lot, so you get 2 minutes. So.
I assure you it's all cool. One that we are really excited about is future of manufacturing. You've heard about this. It's no lie, it's happening. And there are really cool things that are being done where, while you read about the Internet of Things, it is not about the Internet of Things, it's about the nature of things, where physical objects now have hardware, they have storage, they have sensors, microprocessors, software connectivity, and then these smart objects are linked up through networks and then begin to learn from the experience of other types of objects, and then you have an exponential degree of new functionalities that are going to take place. This is really cool. Now this is sustainability at its very core, because it's about efficiency. Although, I mean, people will say efficiency is the obsession of optimists, but I think it's beyond that. I think efficiency in terms of how to make decisions quickly, how to use the materials well, how to think intelligently about optimization, how to deliver products and services quite independent of the interventions of manpower people. These are very exciting opportunities. In the areas of new materials, you're seeing many efforts all over the world where you're incorporating natural fibers, bio-based materials in composites that are just as strong as steel, right? Much lighter weight. 40 years ago, we were talking about carbon fibers, I think when we are undergraduates or in school, but today they are in cars. It's almost ubiquitous. So you're going to see new types of composites and advanced materials in systems. The whole movement where there's the high degree of penetration of digital technologies in everything. I think that's another a cool movement. So I can't stop. I'm an optimist.
Yeah, no, I know. I've seen some of those Internet of Things sort of examples as well. And anything that you'd like to add, Leonie? I mean, any of those really exciting, whether it's technologies or startups that you've seen?
In general, the whole product development, but also linking the different teams to each other, like how we're working, that's maybe not purely circular economy, but on green bonds, how we link the financial markets area to the structured finance area. But in all the new business models, and there in particular circular economy, it is a very positive and innovation-driven approach that we're following, because all the transactions that come in that area are not possible if you look at our normal day-to-day models. Yeah. You always need to have different teams involved because it doesn't fit in one team. Often the size doesn't fit, but then also indeed you need to think of a different structure. It may sometimes still be a relatively new technology. So all areas where you really need to have a group of people involved saying, okay, it is not possible. If we put it into the computer, we get a red flag. But if I just listen to gut feeling, this sounds like a good, sound business model. Parties involved and companies behind it are solid, are our clients. So we should make this possible. And that is what I really like about also the room that we have and the sort of explorative, pioneering exercise that we're really encouraged also to look after finding those solutions. But it makes it on a day-to-day basis very challenging and interesting, because every day is a different innovation that you need to sort out. Yeah. And we don't have a solution for all of them, but already just addressing those and finding ways to solve it is really nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to draw a parallel here between research in technology and research in financial products, right? Because I think what I'm hearing is that actually going through the cycles of innovation actually is quite labor intensive. I mean, that takes time and effort. But I think, Raj, you referred to that when you get everything in place, actually the cost per unit, the manufacturing cost per unit, go dramatically down. Would it be fair to say that we should anticipate a similar development in financial services as well? That once you have these things in place and all the mechanics of, say, an Uber or an Airbnb in place, that actually the transaction cost would go down as well?
Yeah, once you've solved it once, you can repeat it.
Yeah.
So the initial investment will be easier if you can do it 10 times. But also, I think is that currently resources are just not being valued in transactions. And we all know about the stranded asset discussion, but it is something that will, if companies address it now, the issue, the challenges with scarcity of resources, they'll have a huge advantage, competitive advantage. And I think that the same counts for us. If we find solutions now to address that, to take that into our models, to support our clients in making that transition, it will help us as well to be a step ahead. So yes, definitely, then also it will be eventually cheaper.
Yeah, okay. Let me turn to another question from the audience. From it actually reads pretty Dutch. Actually, a gentleman called Hein Omen. It's almost like there's a Dutch conspiracy going on here, because I know that the Dutch ambassador, His Excellency Werner, is in the room as well. So, by the way, this is not set up, folks. Truly, it isn't. I think the question is really about the fact that in the end, reduction in absolute terms is what matters, at least according to Mr. Omen. So how do public companies, or how do companies in general, deal with the market expectations for growth? So you have to grow. It's great if you, on a per unit basis, you reduce, but if you grow, then in absolute terms, you still grow. I mean, my question maybe, Hamid, to you, is that a problem in the first place?
I don't think so. I think you can see it in a number of different ways. I'll give you an example of productivity, for example. We tend to think about productivity, total factor productivity, which is not reliant on increase in input resources, but more on innovation, the technical aspects of your process to become more productive. That's, if you start thinking like that, then that drives growth and profitability anyway. But something else that drives the companies to reduce cost and grow at a rate that they want to is the intensity of the competition. The days when a few countries used to design and make stuff and dump upon the rest of the world have gone. Now everyone has got the ability and the capability in this digital age to design well and make well. And that is the case which is driving competition to a point where companies are competing with new entrants in the market who bring new resilience, new ideas, and new innovations. Therefore, continuous improvement cycle to ensure that the customers that we service are always getting value for money is an important driver for us. So if you look at our business model, it's very simple. Understand the customer requirement in this intensely competitive environment, innovate solutions to fulfill those customer requirements, and in the process, grow your business. It's as simple as that. So there's a number of ways you can look at that, but competition drives it, innovation drives it, and the customer expectation drives it. You grow as a consequence of all of these things. You don't grow as a start point that you're going to grow. No, by fulfilling the customer requirements to the best of your ability and the lowest cost to your competitor makes you grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clear. Rob, what are your views?
Well, I think there's no doubt that when you do it well, the business case for a more sustainable model is absolutely clear, and it's the stuff that I went through earlier on. You have a much more engaged team of people. You have lower costs, which is surprising to many companies that have either not done it well or not yet gone there. You do design much better products. It's an amazing engine for innovation, and you have many more customers. So there's a really strong business case for it, which we've certainly proven to ourselves over the years. When we first started off on the journey, it was a harder story to sell. But increasingly, that's simply gone away. So the numbers are there. We can support it with the numbers. So in our view, the argument's over. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at the clock. I think what we probably best do is go to closing comments. I'd like to give each one of you. Quick calculation, 1 minute for sort of a final closing pitch, if you want to, summarizing your view, and free to start whoever you want. Hamid, can I maybe start with you?
I'm quite positive about circular economy in a number of ways, because we're standing on a threshold of technological revolution. It's not whether the individual technologies are being matured at a certain rate. Is that the integration of these technologies, for example, from sensors embedded in products, talking to the next generation of internet, to sensors embedded in the manufacturing process continually correcting itself to ensure 100% right first time, no waste, no rework, no fallout, nothing, is not a distant dream anymore. I think it's a distinct reality. I think it's going to happen. It's absolutely possible. So going forward, the various technology strands, when we don't have time to look through them and talk about them in detail, will integrate to create solutions we can only dream of today. And that solution is maximizing the potential of our resources on this earth in a way that maximizes values and achieves the personalized customer demand going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Hamid. Thank you, Raj.
Oh, I think it's
Yeah, no, I agree. I concur.
I agree.
We can also decide to just, this is it. Thank you, Hamid.
Yes.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, you can't claim success unless it's sustainable.
Yeah.
Development technologies, business models that define corporations, define the way in which governments work, how society behaves, and responds to these types of initiatives and efforts. It becomes, we need to have it intrinsic, we need to have it inclusive, we have to have it inherent, and so we have to ensure that technology creates those opportunities as well to make this happen. So I think it's a brave new world order, and I think we're going to see some mesmerizing things happen.
Thank you, Raj. Rob.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously an imperative. There is no other way than optimizing resource efficiency via a circular economy.
Yeah.
And the temptation is to think that you're somehow downgrading your options, or you're having to make poor choices, or that the outcome is going to be in some way negative. When we've always been taught to aim for the top, aim for more consumption rather than less, so on and so forth. But I think what we're all finding is that this is simply a much better way to design products and services. No one needs to suffer. There's an amazing business case for it. So why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Agree. Leonie.
Yeah, I would recognize indeed.
It's not easy as the last one.
No,
I realize that, but
the business case, and I think I would just want to put also an encouragement to you all, because circular economy is something that provides a huge opportunity, but today it's just not big enough, and it needs scalability. So if we can all, and I invite you as well, come up just next week or this week when we get into our offices again, to at least start to realize one initiative to scale up the circular economy, it would help already a lot to reach tomorrow's economy sooner.
Thank you, Leonie. I think this is, I really like to thank the panelists. I think this has been fantastic. I think I heard a couple of things, and I probably don't do justice when trying to summarize, but I've heard things about the business opportunity of this. I think all four of you clearly articulated that. I think there's been many examples about the need for an inclusive approach. This is a journey. This is a journey you can't do on your own. It requires capital. It requires partners across the entire value chain, upstream, downstream. Your clients be customers, you become your suppliers, and vice versa. It's an exciting opportunity where technology actually does make things possible today that simply we couldn't even dream about yesterday, and it's only going to accelerate. So I think it's truly exciting. So let me thank the panelists dearly, and please join me in thanking them.